Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions on media production. If you've got questions, just head to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. You can get your questions into us 24/7. Also, if you'd like an enhanced experience, we also have a system called Makana that once you're in there, you can vote the questions up and down so that we can structure the show around your interest, and you can live chat with the other producers. But we've got a bunch of questions already stacking up, so let's dive right in. Jason?
Eric Hertz in Hartford, Connecticut writes in, what are examples of corporate events where you pulled in remote participants from Zoom and displayed them as part of the main presentation?
Go ahead, Alex.
I can't really speak to the ones that I've done for entertainment events. I haven't done a lot of corporate events. Most of my stuff isn't related to entertainment. So we have brought actors and directors into theaters. So when people want to ask questions, either they are the only person people are talking to, or they are one of the actors in a big film, and so there's a Q&A up front. And so we've brought a couple different actors and a couple directors in via Zoom, and so we set that all up. It takes a little bit of time, of course, so we make sure that we usually test them a couple days ahead of time, and then we bring them in. And a lot of it's making sure that we're not echoing back to them because there's open speakers in the room, and then it's figuring out what in some cases we've had a monitor on stage where they sit they're there like they kind of look like they're with the other people that are in the panel. In other cases, we put them right on the screen. In fact, a lot of the moves and the kind of the look that you see in the Michael Krasny show, the Gray Matter show that we're doing today with Renee Ritchie, by the way, so it should be good. But that was all kind of that process was all kind of designed for a show we did with a director for a pretty big film. So that's how we've used Zoom in public areas. The vast majority of Zoom that we've used has been for totally virtual events where there's nobody on stage, so we haven't had that many integrations with the main rooms as far as trying to interact with them. But in those cases, we did.
Guy?
Yeah, I was in the audience physically at Zoomtopia, not last year, but the year before, sitting next to our friend David Brady, and we were both watching this in wonder and awe as they had the people physically there down the hall. So they actually set up a studio down the hall because the mass majority of the people were online. So that monitor that you're seeing right there, let me go to the next slide, is a 75-inch TV turned portrait mode, and then they had the chat from Zoom on that third screen there. And so in real time, we were even joking around. I think David Brady, they're using Zoom OS. He was sitting next to me and he was typing in the chat and it was popping up pretty dang fast. So it was cool to see the eye contact going out to where the online viewers felt like they were there and more a part of it than just him looking off to the side or looking at a moderator, because it flowed really well for a stage. And you could see other people popping in. Actually, Andy L. Anyways, that's what it looks like. So that's a great example of somebody using 75-inch TVs to make it almost life-size. Physically, it looked like they were the size of a person on the stage, if not a little bit bigger. And it was a cool effect. And they were using a Zoom ISO on a MacBook Air Sonnet box and piping that into their switcher. So it was cool to see just a MacBook Air. It was like a $1,200 computer with a $500 box with a capture card. And it worked. And again, it made those online viewers feel like they were more a part of it, because there was way more online viewers, way more. Like there's 20 of us physically versus like 2,000 online. Yeah, so a big difference. So why not cater to the masses?
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes in, Guy, how well does Final Cut perform on a Mac Stadium Cloud Mac? I've had great experiences with Shadow PC for Windows games and apps, but my experiences with VNC on a Mac has been a bit more laggy. Can you use audio on the Cloud Mac?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, good question. So it was just yesterday that I fired this up for the first time and was able to install Final Cut on a Mac Stadium instance. I actually got the idea from Oliver at Mimo Live, because there's another counterpart to Mac Stadium called OakHost in Europe. So for those of you who are European viewers, it's actually less expensive to do this in Europe. And the speeds, his machine was not only faster, but it was cheaper. So I was like, man, that's pretty amazing. I think it's Latvia is where that center is. And so yesterday we did an amazing session in Mimo Live where he did 8 Zoom participants coming in Memo Live. So native Memo Live. But to answer the other question, let's go in there. And first, before I do, in Mac Stadium, it tells you your first login, use a real VNC or something like that, but it's very stuttery. The other recommendations from them are Splashtop, which is what I'm using. I'm going to show you Splashtop. And then the other one is Parsec. So I've got Parsec on this machine. So if you're using those two, it feels very fluid. And yesterday when I was speaking with Oliver, he says OakHost says to use Apple's remote desktop. And I said, hey, is it still fluid? Does Final Cut or Memo Live feel fluid? And he said, yeah, getting full color, full frame rate. So remember, these are machines that are actual physical Mac Minis. Like if you look at some of the behind the scenes videos, it's a data center full of 18,000 plus Mac Minis. They're real machines and you get the whole enchilada. It's all yours. So it's going to feel just like a local machine. If you're using Splashtop, you're using Parsec, it feels like it's there, only it's super fast. And getting your footage in or downloading stock footage, it's super quick. As long as the footage is already up in the cloud, from cloud to cloud, it's a joy. I mean, it almost makes you giggle to transfer, massive 400 meg files in the blink of an eye. Like some stuff's downloaded quicker than like I blinked and it was already on the drive. Like that's how fast it is. So do you guys want to see it, or am I going on too long?
Yeah, sure. That's great. I think
Yeah,
I've heard Alex at one point describe it as if he had a cloud machine up on one of his screens, and then at one point had to remind himself that, hey, that computer's not really here, which is amazing.
This was only last week. I was just like, oh, that PC is not one of my PCs. Because I was looking, I was like, my PCs are unplugged, and how am I looking at the PC? And then I was like, oh, that's the cloud.
Well, actually, that answered Josh's question also from yesterday is, are the ports open for SRT? So this is Wirecast SRT. You can feed, the ports are wide open, so you don't have to do any configuring like you do in AWS. So this is Wirecast going over to Memo Live NDI. So you can do Wirecast SRT in over to Memo Live and then over to Final Cut. I mean, it's just clips are clips. You can toss them around. That's a tiny clip. But you get the idea. I mean, it's editing in the cloud.
Awesome. Next question.
Coming in from the QR code, Marieli Shusha Miero in Wabalo writes in, what's up with Zoom and its new updates?
Alex?
There's a lot of updates. The new update went out on Wednesday, I believe, Tuesday or Wednesday, and it's listed as the 26th. And a lot of updates, the ones that are, I don't know if there's a lot of them that are pertinent, that pertinent to us, but there's a couple things. All screens mode, this is really for testing, for proctoring tests, so it's a side-by-side with the instructor. And Mac Sonoma screen sharing. So if you long click on the screen share, you can get into the Mac Sonoma screen sharing tools as opposed to the native ones that Zoom uses. Apple has added a ton of solutions there. And what you can really see is, one thing that I think that is important to underline is one of the reasons that Zoom runs so well. There's some people who talk about like, well, Zoom's always pushing for a native app. They're always saying the native app is better. Yeah, because they code every the Windows, the Linux, the Mac versions of these are coded to be optimized for the operating system. And so you're not limited to what the browser can do. And these aren't like little Electron apps, and these aren't like some kind of weird proxy of a code. This is native code to each one of the platforms, and so this just underlines them taking advantage of that. And it's just not the same. Like, I don't know what they code Teams in, but I can tell you that a white screen pops up every time I join that covers everything that I actually needed to get in for no reason, and it's been doing it for 2 years. 2 years, and before that, I don't know if it did that because. Oh, right. It crashed every time it opened. I had to go through the web. And so that's what you call not committed to a platform. And so I think that I think it's really exciting to see them, constantly using the native tools and really making sure that we have full access to what the operating system can offer.
Next question.
Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, BC, Canada writes in, are there any AI speech-to-text transcription services that can automatically figure out the different voices and assign a name to each? Using Mac Whisper, which did a good translation, but it would be nice to know who is saying what.
Go ahead, Courtney.
There are a number of them. Google in the Google Cloud speech to text translation does this. It may require some bit of training. It's called speech diarization. So if you search for that term, speech diarization, where it will break a single audio file into different speakers and label them. So look for that. NVIDIA also has that feature, I think, in their text to speech. Sometimes it needs to be turned on, and it may need training with the samples of each speaker and the label to use for each speaker. You have to give them a name or a label, and then it will assign them and divide them out and separate your speech into each individual speaker.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, it was something I stumbled across. We've been doing a lot of recording via Riverside, and one of the things that Riverside automatically lets you download if you just click on it is a text file of everybody that talked, and because they know who you are, because you had to log on, and you're coming from a different source, it's broken out by person. And I would say that they give you timestamps, not as much as I would pay for if I was asking a human to do it, but for an editor, it's quite usable if you just need to find a soundbite. It's pretty good.
One that I've had a lot of success with is otter.ai. There's a free tier that you can go and you can try. You can upload 30-minute clips to see if it'll work for your use case. But there's also the pro and the business tiers are not that expensive. I think it's $240 a year for the business tier. You get 6,000 minutes a month, which is a lot of minutes. I mean, that's 100 hours that you can put up there. And it does a really good job of speaker 1, speaker 2, and then if you tag it, speaker 1 is CJ, speaker 2 is Guy, speaker 3 is Chris. It'll go through and fix the rest of them. If you find that it hasn't done such a good job, you can say, retag the voices, and it'll give it another go. You can have Otter actually join your Zoom meeting if you want it to take the notes automatically and put it in there. And then also it has, similar to Zoom's AI companion, some meeting summarization features, which is really cool. Next question.
Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri writes in, assuming it's not witchcraft, how was this stage lighting accomplished? And he includes a YouTube link.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so if we take a look at this, this is Lauren Alred doing Never Enough, which is, by the way, watching her sing this is pretty amazing. There's a couple of versions there's like 30 versions of her singing it. She sang it from The Greatest Showman. And so, but I think that what's being talked about here is this kind of lighting in the background there. And so you can see there's a lot, I mean, obviously there's some spotlights on the sides, and I'm not sure, that's nothing, I don't know, those are moving lights. So, but if what you're talking about is all the lighting that's happening behind her, and there's also, if you look at the wide shots, let's see, up here, you can see it all around. That's LED walls. That's what happens when you have all the money. So when you have a show with all the money, and you're not spending it on going out and somewhere else, but you'll see it's pretty impressive. Let me see if we can pull back to that wide shot there. But I believe those are all LEDs up there on the ceiling. So those are just ribs of LEDs. So they have little strips of them, because remember that you can get these LEDs that are only about a decimeter in squared. So you can make long lines of them. You're not really limited to that. So I think that, most of the what you're seeing with the light rays, going through the haze, which we've talked about in the past, those are all, that's all just lights. And you can see where those lights are affixed because you can see you can see the openings. Boy, do I hate VLC. Okay, hold on. Piece of trash. Anyway, so what you can see here is you can see these cuts here. This is where they're hiding the physical lights. So these physical lights are behind those LEDs. So you can see them here. But all of the stuff out here, these are LED walls that are going all the way out into the audience. And if we pull back again I think we got some wide shots again here. And let's see. So you can see that these are they put those lights we saw on the other side, those gaps. So they have all of these lights, all these movers that are all here that are shining through to create that, that effect there. And then I believe, there we go. So this, I'm pretty sure these are all just strips of LEDs that go out here. Then you have movers down here. You have movers along these slots, and everything else is all an LED wall. basically one big LED wall that's being mapped with all of those effects. It's pretty impressive. So not witchcraft, but impressive. So
Go ahead, Chris.
It might be witchcraft.
it could
No,
be.
I think
There could be some witchcraft involved in the design and potentially the amount of GPUs that would be
The
required
witches
to
did the
run that wall.
storyboarding, okay?
Yeah. Exactly.
I think some of this is a byproduct of COVID because American Idol? Which one of those shows was that?
I don't.
One of those did
America's
a
Got
big,
Talent.
a big Zoom audience during COVID, and I don't remember the big video walls prior to that, but this may be sort of leftover from COVID.
It could be. What happened is that these walls became useful when they reached about. So you just really couldn't get a wall that big for a very long time, and there was a point in about 2017, 2018 where we started seeing I don't know what the wall is here, but we started seeing 0.9, 1.5, 1.7 inch millimeter walls, and that's the distance between the points. And as they got to that point, you started not having the array issues. And the older, America's Got Talent has had these LED walls for a while, but a lot of times you'd see some array in the early days. And if you see the ones overseas, you still see them array. But this one's the one that has all the money. And so, and what's hard is I bet you it's still low twos. And the reason for that is there is a curve on the back. So you can still curve, I think, the 1.7s a little bit. And you can see that curve is not very much, because the problem really is that when the LEDs are really close together, it's hard to turn them so that they can curve, because they'll run into each other. And so as that, like for instance, a 0.9 is pretty much flat. So you can't really bend them, or build the round for them. But I haven't seen that level until this was posted. So thanks for posting that. But it is the people get more and more. The technology around the LEDs has gotten better and better and better. And hopefully the people who are doing Sunday morning news shows can watch this and realize that they could buy better LEDs than the trash that they're using right now.
Next question.
Fred Parr in Kent, Washington writes in, what are your thoughts on the variable diffusion panel? And it includes a YouTube link.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I briefly looked at this demo. This technology has been around for almost 30 years now. This is it's basically a variable translucent LCD panel that is in a frame like you would put some 216 or other type of diffusion. And as you can see there, you can adjust. It has a remote control that connects to it that lets you adjust the level of translucency in this panel. I didn't get to the point to see how expensive it is. These type of panels have been available for architectural use to make windows in conference rooms that go from transparent to opaque or translucent, highly translucent, where you can't see an image through them. But here they're using it as diffusion. I don't know how much it might color the light on its way through. They are a little LCD, it's an LCD technology. So it does look pretty interesting. Guy maybe knows the price because he's had his finger on the pulse of these new things.
What do you think, Guy?
Actually, I'm not sure of the price on this, but I did see that it was made by Xylite, and I know Xylite is an expensive brand, so it's going to be a pricey one. A friend of mine built a home where he had this for privacy reasons, like Courtney was alluding to, and the first time I saw it, I was like, that's really cool. And then Nanlite, I have a mixed panel, I believe it's called the 60, which actually has this built into the light, so I can adjust diffusion on my light as a separate parameter. So instead of carrying in a grip truck, you might have like this is full stop, quarter stop, 3/4, quarter, half, quarter. So you can see there's different translucencies, and you might have these in 8-foot floppies. So it's a lot to carry around. So if you could just carry around one of these and just vary it, a couple, it could be a huge time saver, especially if you're moving around really quick. But I suggest everybody go watch that video. There's a spot where he shows where it's got like the Rembrandt V on his cheek, and it's pretty cool to see how that just spreads apart or goes back. It's amazing that you could control diffusion to that minor degree. Because at first he goes through and he goes like 25, 50, 100, and really the effectiveness is in that 75% range. And watch that part of the video, and he'll if you step through it frame by frame, you can see it's really amazing. So I can't wait to. Well, I don't know if I'll get one, but depends on the price, I guess. But I hope the technology gets cheap, or we could just go to Home Depot and just go get the architectural one and build it into something that we could use for a lot less.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes in, Alex, you mentioned that large LED volumes can be very power hungry. Do you think that virtual production can still be less energy intensive than conventional sets?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it depends on the conventional set you're comparing it to. If it's a conventional set that uses old tungsten type lighting or HMI lighting, it might be a little bit since it's using all LEDs. But those huge, low pitch LED walls that are used for virtual sets consume massive amounts of energy. And especially since you're using them in back of the people or curved around the people, they use them overhead, and sometimes they use them out in front for interactive lighting. That can consume a lot of power, and considering just discrete lights are all now using LEDs, as we just saw in some of those demonstration videos, you're probably using a lot less power without the LED wall. But of course, you're laying in information behind them later.
Alex?
Yeah, I don't think that being energy efficient is why people use the LED volumes, and so I don't think that that's what they're trying to do. I know that at 3210, when they had that open, they were looking at putting an LED volume in there. Now, 3210 has worked on, I don't know, hundreds, maybe thousands of visual effects shots and all kinds of stuff from Raiders of the Lost Ark all the way up to Jurassic Park and many, 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 many others. And so it's never had a power problem until they decided they wanted to try to put a volume in there, and then they realized they would have to run. And it had, I believe, 2,000 amp 3-phase. Is what was in the building, and that was not enough to run the wall. So they were going to have to run additional power in to make the wall work, to give you a sense of how much power these walls need. But that said, there's potentially less setup time. There's potentially there's a lot of other calculations that make it more efficient. So, but I don't think that they're trying to figure out impulse savings on the LED wall. You might spend less days shooting, so maybe that saves some time over it, but you still need a lot of power.
Next question.
Kern in Maine writes in, looking for recommendations to build a traveling streaming kit with a budget of $3,000 for everything but the computer. Please include cables, case, etc. Thanks in advance.
Alex?
So the question is what are you trying to cover an event, or are you trying to stream yourself? So like are you trying to connect to something and be there for that $3,000, or do you need multiple cameras? I'll show you what I haven't done a small kit like this for streaming other people recently. But I have, for when I'm appearing on places, this is the kind of thing that this is the last one I think I used last year. I kind of have this built into a kit. I can set this kit up in about I think I've timed it at about 9 minutes. I think 8 or 9 minutes I can get this up from the case. So these are two Nanlite Pavotube 6Cs. Now this is a FX30, which would blow your budget, but you could use the E10 or the Z10 or is it EV-Z10 or
ZV-E10?
E10. Can't figure that out. Anyway, but you could use that as a replacement for this, and that would get back into your budget. Of course, you said not to include the computer. This is a computer stand that folds into almost nothing. It's called a Brokun. It's Brokun or something like that on Amazon. It's about $35. I just bought 2 more of them. A little switcher so that I can control. I can get out of there. I have my Mix Pre 3 so I can get rid of the fan noise in the hotel. I have the panel usually on this so that I can raise my hand, and that's pretty much it. So so for a self-streaming kit, this would probably, if you swap the camera out, would probably get you pretty close to that $3,000 unit. If you're trying to actually stream something else, you have to let us know what kind of thing you're streaming, because maybe it works to have webcams and you might use some Insta360 links. Maybe, you have 3 of them, you do USBs. Like for instance, I've done 3 and 4 camera shoots with Insta360s that are all plugged into a Mac Studio. I'm using Mimo Live, and you just kind of cut between them all and everything else. And that would all, that would definitely fit into your budget. The big thing is the I/O. So that's why you want to have something like a Mac Mini Pro or a Mac Studio so that you have enough I/O to get in and out, because the laptop will run out of I/O, and you really don't want to use breakouts when you're using webcams. So so those are the kind of things to think about there. But $3,000 is pretty austere if you're using real cameras. You probably could do it with web cameras. It just depends on the kind of subject matter you're shooting.
Guy?
Yeah, it really depends, like Alex was saying, on what type of content you're shooting. I like what he showed as far as if you're just doing yourself in a hotel room. I have a similar setup. vMix is what I'm seeing a lot of the portable streamers use. It's just a PC app that runs on a gaming type laptop. So that would be one option. You add some I/O capture cards. I also run a large Facebook group of 30,000 people, and it has a lot of these folks using this type of design where you're getting an ATEM Mini, and they show themselves all over the place using these types of configurations where they have the case and then a Stream Deck, and it's all built in like that. The other one I'd look at, John Idelson and Oliver are building these kits in after hours. You can watch them start to build this thing. This is one's going to go above the price threshold, but it just depends on what you want to do. But they're using PTZ cameras over NDI, and it goes into this Mac Mini. So that's another option. The other one is Magewell has this thing called the Director Mini, which if you wanted a touchscreen solution, this would just a couple webcams, because it has UVC input or HDMI or NDI. So this is a fast way to go if you just want something that's touchscreen, portable, that isn't the YOLO box. I trust Magewell. This thing has gotten rave reviews so far. So those are a couple options to look at.
Next question.
Mathieu Lecomte in Oakland writes in, when using for playout, is there any trick to get audio out via SDI from a HyperDeck Studio Mini? Full-size units seem to be more configurable.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, the mini unit only supports embedded audio and in QuickTime files. So maybe if you're using the MXF files, they may not support it. It supports up to 16 channels in SDI output, embedded in that SDI output. So whatever you're sending that SDI with the embedded audio has to be able to de-embed it to extract the audio from it. It has no, according to its specs, which I was surprised, it says there is no HDMI audio input, which it says right here in the specs. HDMI audio input, none. So I was really surprised at that. But it does support it under SDI, 16 channels embedded on the input and the output. It does support 8 channels embedded on HDMI output, but it has to exist in the file that you bring in. You can't record it in that unit with the audio coming in from the HDMI, apparently.
Alex?
Yeah, you need an audio. I'm assuming what you need is an audio de-embedder. And you can get those. Those are relatively inexpensive, and these are SDI, probably SDI to audio. And in those dip switches, you can start to change. You can start to select which channels you're outputting. So that's probably what you're looking for there. But I don't think there's any native way to pull it out of there. And I think that the Shuttle HD, will do HDMI input, but these larger ones I don't think have a way to do that.
Next question.
John Nichols in Concord, California writes in, I have a bunch of rounded corner adjustments I need to make in Keynote. The objects are on the same page. Can I apply the same adjustments to all of the objects at the same time or quickly?
Hey, we know a Keynote guy. Alex?
Hey, so there's a thing over here called, if you go to Keynote, provide Keynote feedback. You're going to need to tell them you want to do that. What I think John wants to do is select 2 objects here. You can see these rounding controls. Unfortunately, the rounding controls don't do anything when 2 of them. You can do one at a time, but it's not affecting both of them. So what you'll do is you'll have to end up. Now note that when you grab onto these, I do pay attention. You see that radius of whatever you're trying to hit to. So you can be somewhat precise. If a lot of these shapes are the same, you're not going to want to hear what I'm about to say, but if a lot of these shapes are the same, oftentimes I will build one, copy it over and over and over again, and put everything back in it. Now, again, what I do often, and kind of rebuild it, it's faster than trying to get all of those corners to fit properly.
Chris?
Not 100% sure, but I think, Alex, if you click on the third tab over, that radius, I believe, shows up as a field that you can type in the number also, doesn't it?
And a range. Let's see. Range, position, align, lock. Oh, corner radius. There you go. You can cut and paste it in there. Yep.
Oh, select both of them and change the number there.
Oh, let's see. Hold on. Chris has shown Alex how to use. Let's see, 40. Whoa, Chris has
make it totally. Make it huge. Make it 500 or something.
Yeah.
Bingo. Chris
wins. It's funny is this is a tab that I almost never ever use, and so this tutorial brought to you by Chris Fenwick.
Chris Fenwick. We may edit, but
Nice.
Chris Fenwick is an editor. Next question.
There's a difference between people who edit and editors. That's all I'm going to say.
Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge writes in, Hugo, using and comparing the QCam Ego for Vision Pro content creation, QCam Ego spatial video and photo converter, thoughts?
Go ahead, Alex.
I would probably wait until NAB before I started buying cameras. So NAB is not too far away. We're now in the NAB tractor beam. So there is this is where you take your hands off the controls and you try not to buy anything. Once you hit March 1 is when the NAB tractor beam begins, and you don't buy anything. Here, listen to me. Listen to my words. Don't buy anything until April 20th. You just need to see. You need to know. So if you have, so be very careful. There's a lot of people pretty excited about spatial right now, and I think that we may see a lot of things at NAB that are related to that. Apple's kind of turn that switch back on again, and so. But I would really suggest waiting until NAB before you buy anything, unless you have a mission critical event that absolutely has to have hardware. We are too close to NAB to buy things. So just cool your jets. Just wait.
Just a reminder, the show is driven by your questions. If you have general questions, you can go to askofficehours.global and go there, type in your name and your question, and you're off to the races. Or if you're in Makana, you can also vote the questions that have been submitted up and down so we can focus the show. We've got a pretty exciting second hour coming up with production lighting and stage designer Nathan Schlegel, who's got some awesome production stories and some really cool slides to share. So if you have questions about staging, about high-profile events, about theatrical and lighting design, the second hour is right up your alley. So get those questions in as well. Next question.
Coming in from the QR code, Bob Hershon writes in, I hope you'll share all the ways people can collect eclipse data for research projects like Eclipse Soundscapes, NASA Globe Observer, Eclipse, and Solar Eclipse Safari. And maybe something about this being the heliophysics big year.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, this is the end of this April will be the end of quite a density, quite a high density of eclipses in the world. I was doing some research and I realized I was thinking, there's one every couple of years somewhere in the world. There's always going to be one every couple of years. There is not, So there is a wider range of stuff there. So we're going to start spreading out. We are going to get one in about 2 more years in Greenland, and then it's not another 5 or 6 years before we see another one. So we are going to try to gather as much data as we can. We'll talk about what we're figuring out there. We think we've got a pretty good group of people that are going to be doing stuff. We're working with Time and Date and doing a bunch of other pieces. And but Time and Date, by the way, they were on yesterday, and they are really fantastic. So I would definitely check out there to look for more information.
Go ahead, Chris.
I also like to remind you that there's oftentimes eclipses over the ocean that nobody gets to drive to and go check it out.
But these are not. There's actually they list those as well, and they're not. I mean, it's like 1 in 2 years, and the next one's in 5 or 6 years, and there's not land or no land. There are. You are right, but there's not any happening. I mean, it's just really slowing down. It just happens to be, an eclipse. We talked about it yesterday. An eclipse only happens somewhere in the world on average every 350 years. And it just happened to be the math of, to a specific location. It goes over a specific location every 350 years, and so on average. But I think that, if you look at the eclipse schedule, they're listing those, and for total solar eclipses, land or sea, they're spreading out. Just we just happen to be lucky.
They're clearly very rare, and I still think it might be the reason why the aliens come to Earth. They come to see the eclipses.
We need to have. Okay, I have my new Mid-Journey challenge here. Aliens watching the eclipse.
The interstellar tourists are on their way.
Yes, exactly.
I think, Alex, you might have said at one point, how crazy is it in the scope of the solar system that we happen to have a moon that is far enough away that fits right over the sun? Like, it's wild.
It's the only place in the solar system where the moon fits perfectly over the sun. And what's interesting is that the sun. We talked about this yesterday. And if you haven't seen the show, yesterday was fantastic. The second hour with time and date. The sun is 400 times larger than the moon. It also is 400 times further away from the Earth than the moon. What are the chances? Very, very small. So almost, yeah. So anyway, so it's incredible. If you're somewhere that can get to an eclipse to view it, I would highly recommend it. It's coming up in a little over a month, and it's pretty exciting.
Next question.
Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas writes in, have you tried Google's new AI notebook? It's pretty amazing and way more than just another note app. It's free, and he includes the link.
Go ahead, Courtney.
This is called Notebook LM. It's Google has labeled it experimental, which is always dangerous because that means they're probably going to kill it in just a few months. But what it does is it allows you to use a large language model, only in this case it's a small language model, limited to the amount of information that you put into it. You create notebooks by clicking a plus sign here, and here's some example notebooks down here. And once you enter your data by pasting or adding, uploading PDFs or Google Notes or Google Docs into this notebook, you can then query the notebook by typing something here and asking it to summarize or create to analyze any of the data that you've added to that notebook. And you can create multiple notebooks and do searches across multiple notebooks that you've created. So it limits its search. It doesn't pull anything in from the outside. Sorry about the glitch. To use in its analysis of the data and its summary of the data. So it's a good research tool if you want to limit your research to only specific amounts of data that you want to search across, as opposed to having it hallucinate with bogus information that may be out there on the internet.
I think the idea that industries can create a very, very focused perspective to give the AI is huge, because when you're talking about taking in the whole internet, like Courtney said, you're subject to those sorts of hallucinations. But when you can say, only use these sources, and these sources are the verified, for sure true data, I can think about training new employees and giving them a tool to say, hey, this can be your starting place to ask questions, to learn more about some of the real nuts and bolts about what we do. Very exciting stuff. Next question.
Robin Cutshaw in Atlanta, Georgia writes in, Bob Heil has passed. I knew him well and have a lot of his products. And then there's a web link.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I can't say I knew him well, but anyone who's been to NAB over the last, I don't even know how many years, knows that Bob Heil would wear these incredible purple shirts, and he was just kind of a personality, kind of a force majeure, and truly just a wonderful human. So yeah, rest in peace.
Go ahead, Alex.
Bob Heil, I did have an opportunity to meet Bob quite a few times at a variety of different things, and he's sent me a couple PR40s. I said, "Oh, I'm doing these podcasts." He's like, "Oh, let me send you some PR40s," and sent me 6 of them to use. Which we used for. I still have one of them that I still use. But he And I think that the thing that's amazing about Bob, or that was amazing about Bob, was he was just always so excited. He was always just so excited about what he was doing. You just felt like he was just having a great time. Like he's just making up stuff and making up new things and figuring stuff out. And he was just always, I mean, I'm sure he had a down day. I just never, we just never saw it. And he was just, he was just such a positive force of energy that you just always, when you saw him somewhere at NAB, you'd always want to run over and say, "Hey, Bob, how's it going?" And he would always remember who you were, and he'd be like, "How's it going? How is Mac break?" And blah blah, and he would just be talking about it. And then, and anything you were talking about, he'd be excited about, and he'd be oftentimes asking. There was one time in NAB where someone had broken into his. It was in the Westin or whatever they call it, the Westgate. They had broken into his hotel room and stolen all of his electronics. And he was laughing about it. like he was just like, they stole it, but they didn't get this. Like he was like all he immediately shifted over to, they didn't get this. This is my collector mic, and it was in the da 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 da. And so they got my laptop, they got this thing, but they didn't get this mic, and he was like, ha, and it was just an amazing thing to watch. And he's just really, really, he was an amazing person, and he'll be missed. Absolutely.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, just 10 years older than me. Goodness. I love Bob Heil. He did a podcast that Leo carried on the Twit network for a while, Ham Nation. And you can still find it on YouTube. So if you want to get a sample of Bob Heil's personality, check out Ham Nation on YouTube, all about ham radio.
Next question.
Zach Jeffers writing in from the Great Pacific Northwest. Using Loopback on a Mac Studio, I noticed some applications will fail quite something unless I restart them. For example, scrubbing through YouTube may require a stop-start of the player to resync to the output.
I think that's fall quiet, little transposition there. Go ahead, Alex.
I'm looking at this, and I think that you should look at your CPU usage. Just look at how hard you're pushing your computer. This is not. I mean, I've seen a lot of things with Loopback, and I've seen a lot of things on the Mac Studio. I've not seen this behavior, but take a look at your CPU usage and what and how close you're getting to it, and let us know what that is, and we'll continue to try to figure out what it is.
Other thing I might suggest is open up the console and check the logs for crashes. Sometimes that you have, especially with Sonoma, it seems like core audio has been a little unstable. I've seen some loopback crashes as well, and that might point you in the direction of why you might be having that issue. But do get back to us. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes in, the Magewell Director Mini looks like a very powerful box. Could it be a viable ATEM Mini substitute if it had a USB webcam output?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it's way more powerful than an ATEM Mini. I mean, it's got SRT in and out, NDI. It has a touch screen. Yeah, it's way more powerful. And as far as UVC, it's in and out. So you've got both. So you can look at the specs right here. You've got 2 HDMI ins, 2 USB AV outs, 3 IP sources, SRT, RTMP, NDI, NDI-HX, NDI-HX3, and you could store media files on it. So, and then you could stream, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, SRT, RTMP, NDI. So, and a 5.4-inch screen, and it's got Ethernet and Wi-Fi. So, I mean, that's quite a package for $1,299. I don't think there's anything on the market that can touch this thing. So, I think it's a winner.
Go ahead, Alex.
Sure. like when people, I don't know if you're using those things. I mean, I think that the big thing is that, there's a lot of stuff that has, just because it says it can do it, can it actually do it? So saying that it can replace it until I've actually used it quite a bit, I'd be kind of like, maybe I'd use it, but I don't, for the most part, if I'm, for me, SRT is generally something that I'm focused on in the cloud. So I'm not really thinking about how to get SRT back to my home computer. If I'm doing SRT, I'm usually thinking about how is it going to sit somewhere else and be in the cloud there. So it being able to do that is fine. I do think that the USB, being able to do UVC is great, except for the fact that most of my UVC usage is because I want to control the camera, which I won't be able to do that I know of. With something like the Insta360. So at that point, I don't know if I'd really use it. Because when I use the USB cameras, I'm typically using an Insta360 link, and I typically want a Mac open, the Mac that's doing it. That's why I end up using Mimo. That's how I really got into using Mimos, because I needed to use it with those cameras. So I think that's fine. I think that the real power of the ATEM, and again, I use a lot of different switchers. I mean, we use Sony switchers and we use Ross switchers and Grass Valley switchers and Blackmagic switchers. I'm using Mimo. I'm installing Vector. So there's a lot of things that I'm interacting with. The thing that I really like about the Blackmagic switcher is that generally it just works. So other than not showing up in Zoom every once in a while, or once a week or whatever, it's pretty low level code. I'm not super excited about having a lot of software running my switcher, because that's my show. And so I tend to back into hardware when I want it to make sure that it's actually going to work. And again, the way I use most of my ATEMs are either for very small things and mostly for sitting on my desk. My Extreme sits on my desk, and I will say that the extensibility of it, of being able to have stuff like Mix Effect Pro and have all kinds of remote calls, and the ecosystem that you work inside of, are all contributing factors. Being able to shade cameras, being able to do all the other things that we do with the ATEM switchers. So, is it a replacement? It will really depend on how you plan to use it and what you plan to use it for. I think that it could be a replacement for some folks, but I think that that's a pretty small sliver of the use cases.
Next question.
Paul Wahus in Austin, Texas writes in, will a Synology NAS connected to a Windows 11 server run a virtual CentOS Linux LAMP, which is Linux Apache MySQL PHP web server, in sync with another dedicated LAMP server at a co-location facility?
Jason.
I don't know why you would ever connect a Windows 11 server to a Synology NAS, but barring that first part, yes, of course it'll run CentOS with LAMP. And at Colo, yeah, but probably not very well in real time.
Next question.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California writes, should Stream Decks be used in production? And if not, what are good alternatives?
Alex.
Yes, with care. So the main thing is that I have a small Stream Deck over here I run my presentation with. I've got another Stream Deck over here that I run playback with, and I got another Stream Deck over here that I control my telestrator. So it's not like I'm not using Stream Decks. So I just want to make sure you're like I have almost every version of a Stream Deck, and I use them for comms. I use them for controls. I use them, but the challenge that I get into is that my main complaint, which I've said before on the show, is that the travel on the keys is not far enough. And so what that leads to, and I see it on the show with other panelists, so I can see them doing it, is that you either double strike the key by accident, or it doesn't, or you don't strike it. And so it doesn't happen very often, but most of my work, and it just depends on the kind of production you're doing, most of my work, a bad key is like a week of meetings, like of how this happened and how this is never going to happen again and why, so if you're not in that kind of production, like at home, the reason I have all these Stream Decks is because I'm at home. And if I have a bad key, I go, oh, sorry about that. And then I just go do something else, and I'm not going to have any meetings. like there's not going to be any meetings about it not working. And it's very convenient, and it's very powerful, and I use it all the time. And in production, I still use Stream Decks in production for comms. And for other things that I'm picking up, where I don't use Stream Deck is if this key doesn't work, you will see it on screen. And I know a lot of people do, but that's where I stop because I've had enough miskeys that I don't want to try to explain how something that I spent a couple $100 on failed when I should have just been using the hardware switcher or whatever I'm doing. So that's the only thing for setup, for pulling up macros, for doing all kinds of other stuff, like for getting things done for comms. I use it all the time in production. And for my home system, I use a lot of them in production. But for stuff that matters, that's going to be in front of a lot of people, I tend to go back to more established hardware.
Guy?
Yeah, I see a lot of them in production. I mean, as far as doing playouts, a lot of folks will myself included, we use them all the time. And the nice thing about them is I could see the feedback. So we're doing stuff in the cloud where we have multiple operators spread across the world. And so when they push a button, or if something's in preview, I could look down and I could see what's in preview just by not even having to look up at the multi-view. I could see what's going on. And I mean, we are in a position where if you push the wrong button, it'll cost $100,000. And there's three of us all with that button in front of us, and we do it every month. We're doing same show, and it's been 100% reliable. So I don't know. I'm on the camp of what else are you going to use? The other thing that you can use, Central Control by Joe DeMax. With so some of us will get these older new tech LC11 live controls. You can find them on eBay for like $300, and then that device, it gives you that nice travel, that nice punch. So people are picking those up and using them in production. Or there's other ones from the X keys that are also very nice that are specifically made for Wirecast or vMix. Those are inexpensive. The ones that I'd probably stay away from are TIST. TIST, I see a lot of those out there too, TYST, if you're looking for something to punch in. Or a lot of people also use the APC mini panels and Central Control and program those things. So if you're looking for an alternative, those are ones that Joe has given you the templates, which save lots of time. So it's worth every penny to use Joe's. It's basically like a translator. So I'd look into that as well.
And Guy, when you're using those in production with Companion, do you ever find that you have any sort of reliability or uptime issues? I haven't seen it, but when I look at how I'm connecting Companion, like from the outside, it's nervous. But you've got real experience.
Yeah, we're using Companion satellite even, so it's through a VPN. So yeah, everybody's VPN'd in, and it's solid. I mean, like I said, we've each got two. So we've got one for cutting and another one for audio, so we can see what's going on two sides, and then we have some failover stuff that we can punch it to if we need to. But I love them. I mean, they're amazing. I mean, I'm holding one in my hand right now.
Go ahead, Alex.
Another one to look at when you start to want larger devices, which are not nearly as flexible, but oftentimes have, again, more travel, is JL Cooper. So JL Cooper is going to build a lot of stuff that is a little heavier, and it's got a lot of, it's probably 4 times more expensive. so you can get it, but you can feel it when you're using it. And again, travel on the keys and a lot of the feedback there is pretty cool.
Next question.
Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri writes in, I've been revisiting vMix from the cloud on AWS using vMix 27's new Zoom integration. What's the minimum instance type I should use?
Guy?
Yeah, there was an article written, I think it was actually written on our show. Michelle McGregor for Streaming Media put up a how-to, and she had recommended an instance that was too weak, which is the 2X, and she suffered, her show crashed because of it. So she then went back and said, yeah, you need a 4XL minimum. So the difference here in pricing, you can see that a 2X is 75 cents, 1.2 for a G4DN. So you can see, like in my vMix, I have G4DN 4X, 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 and then I have a 2X for my PowerPoint. And if you want to change the head on this, it's not like you have to run back to your Best Buy or wherever you got your computer. You can just select an instance, and you could change that instance to be a different type. So that's the crazy thing about these computers is they're in the cloud, but you can actually just change the hardware with a couple clicks. vMix will ask you again for the license because it'll be like, hey, my settings have changed, my hardware's changed, so it knows, and it'll say like, hey, you're on a different system. But it's pretty amazing. So Chad, I remember seeing your post in Facebook where you had some issues. Some of us stepped in and said, yeah, you need at least a 4X. But yeah, it's just change that instant type, and that stuttering that you're experiencing will go away. It'll smooth it all out. It's just lack of power, lack of RAM. So you need enough vCPUs to handle all those talking heads in Zoom. So hope that helps.
Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois writes in, when using Mix Effect Pro for super sources for gray matter, do you use the iPad or Companion to make the MIMO switches?
Alex?
Yeah, so I'm the super sources. Yeah, so I'm not using Mix Effect Pro for the gray matter, because Mix Effect Pros would be working with my ATEM. I am trying to rebuild it that way, just as a thought process, but right now I'm doing it all in MIMO. And yes, the answer is that I am using the iPad. I'll show you what my interface looks like. Let me just pull this up real quickly here. I think I can pull it up quickly. Yeah, so I might have trouble pulling it up live, but yeah, so what I'm using is I use the Mimo app on the iPad to design an interface to make that work. So that's what's allowed me to kind of build these out relatively quickly. I'm just trying to find it really quickly here. Let's see if I can. see here. I may not be able to give it to you as fast as I'd like. Let me see if I.
It's really amazing that we're in live shows now, and whether they're streamed or whether they're live in front of people, the fact that we can take a tool like an iPad or like an iPhone and be able to use a virtual button to control real physical spaces is it's amazing how reliable it is. Even when I've even used, like, in a pinch, gotten the Stream Deck mobile app running on a phone just to do things like a mute, and it's like when you get an iPad Pro 12.9 inch with like just 64 buttons on it, you feel like you're in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I was just trying to see if I can. Oh, here it is. Hold on 1 second. Let me pull this up here. I love the fact that I can't pull things out of Discord directly because I don't know why. Anyway, so let me. I was sending it to somebody else, so that's why I was trying to launch it, and I just didn't have quite enough time to do that. So this is, if you look at it here, this is what I'm using here. So you can see that the way I have this set up here is that I have my slate that starts the show, then I have a countdown clock, and then I have the end. And then this is Michael solo, and then there's two versions of the 2-up. So there is a 2-up and then a 2-up without the lower third on it, and then I have one that highlights the guest, and then I have one that is the question. And I made the grid, the grid much smaller so that I could kind of create some white space and so on and so forth. And then I can start live streaming. I can start records. And I can start both records or each individual one if I want to, and I can stop them if I want to on the record. And then of course I can hit stop all and it'll stop everything. And I have to admit that using this iPad really has, again, I'm using it for smaller activation, but I want that for everything. I was thinking, I was like, I want to be able to, and so it actually has me kind of like, I want to be able to build those kind of interfaces for like little presentations that I'm doing and everything else, because it's been super useful, to be able to kind of simplify that rather than looking at a complex interface. I still have the Mimo interface up, but I can very quickly jump away from that.
Go ahead, Chris.
Alex, is the stop all button conspicuous? I would be afraid I would bump that really easy. I'd put that up at the top.
I put it at the bottom so it stays out of where I'm doing most of my work. So if you look at it here, it's down at the bottom. So I did think about that a little bit in the sense that all my stuff that I'm working with is over here. And
so always with your right hand?
Yeah, I'm always using my right hand. So it's with my right hand. Okay. I'd have to think about it. And I do look at everything pretty carefully when I do it. I mean, it's still, again, it's not a piece of hardware. Doesn't have a lot of travel, no travel, that I was just complaining about a second ago. But I am thinking a little bit more than I normally would. I wouldn't do a sports event this way probably. And I probably wouldn't put this on the same, one. But I have, one of the things I'm looking at right now is I have two iPads. The way my desk is set up, I've got an iPad here and an iPad there, and a touch screen in front of me right here, like right underneath these screens. And so I have thought about having two of these apps because I think they'll both talk to it and have, record and tracking and everything else on one side and have all my production on another. But I change location when Michael shows up. So I move out of where I'm sitting and I go over somewhere else. And so I'm still kind of building this kind of two production location thing right now in the office. So anyway, but I haven't had too much trouble with it.
Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York writes in, what would be a good alternative to NDI Studio Monitor to monitor a live feed in real time at different spots throughout a building?
Good guy.
Yeah, how real time is real time? Because if you want it really fast, just get a DA with some SDI cable and run it. Otherwise, Teradek cubes, you could attach those wirelessly. Axoon is another company that has made those kind of knocked off Teradek. If you are going to use NDI Studio Monitor, because of the way multicast works, I would set up an NDI bridge and then lower that data rate down to like 8 megabits with NDI HX and let the other folks hit that. And so they're not hitting your full, they don't need the full meal deal. They just need something for framing and for viewing. So I would probably just go NDI bridge instead.
All right, that's going to take us to the top of the first hour here. Just a reminder, we do have a couple more shows coming up this week. Tomorrow is our general Q&A for the weekend, but just remember, because it's Saturday, we've got some of the new hosts coming in to train, as well as some new people on the back end. It's also where we do some testing and stuff, try things a little differently. On Sunday, it's our introspection meeting, and that's where we talk about more internal things about the show, more philosophical topics. And also, we don't stream that, so we can talk a little bit more freely. And then on Saturday, right after the show, so that's 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, we have our new panelist meeting. If you are new to the show and you're saying, hey, I have something that I could contribute there, this is a great place to learn about what does it take to be a panelist and how can you keep contributing to the Office Hours family. See you on the second hour. And today we are joined by a guest whose career trajectory is as dazzling as the stages he illuminates. Nathan Schlegel, Director of Production for Vision Technical Group, is a luminary in the world of live event production. From the young age of 14, Nate began coordinating equipment rentals and delving into the complexities of intelligent lighting and DMX universes, and really laying the foundation that propelled him through a pretty dynamic journey at the intersection of arts and technology. His work runs the gamut of live events, lighting up stages for top entertainers, political campaign events, even setting the stage for Pope Francis when he visited Philadelphia. He's collaborated on lighting and scenic design for the Philadelphia Flower Show, cruise ship launches, international resort grand openings, and major corporate events like Cisco Live and Dreamforce. So his work's had to evolve and adapt in a world, especially post-COVID, where we're pivoting to virtual platforms, social media, hybrid events. You've got to design to engage and excite not just in the arena, but across global audiences. So, Nathan, welcome to Office Hours. Oh, can't hear you.
There we are. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Excellent. Thank you for having me. That was quite the flattering introduction. I appreciate that.
So, how'd you get started? I mean, you have such a wide breadth of experience. I'm really curious if you could share with us, for our audience, like, how did you get into this whole world?
Sure. So the journey really began for me in junior high school. I was kind of had ambitions of being a performer, and quickly got knocked down and was told that I wasn't ready for the stage. So I was put backstage to work on the stage crew, and kind of started to get into the lighting and backstage aspects there. All throughout high school, I was given incredible opportunities at Wilson to work with the latest state-of-the-art technologies and really get a good introduction into what is possible in the event industry.
And then when you back up and think about, you literally were coordinating lighting rentals and intelligent lights movers, doing
Yes.
DMX, but at 14. So how did you get that relationship started with, I think it was a company out of Delaware?
Yeah, Rick McKinney at Mainlight, first industry guy that I ever had the chance to work with, spoke with, and he really just helped me get organized and know what kind of equipment we could use and what kind of technology would work for us. And we've continued that relationship up to today, which is pretty exciting. Knowing him literally as the first guy in the industry, and we're still almost weekly contacts at this point.
And you did go on to study this in college, so after high school, but most people that come into that arena don't start, they don't have practical experience. They start with the theory and then they try to learn practice. You kind of did it backwards. How do you think that impacted that career trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really took me and propelled me into the current portion of the industry that I'm in. Obviously, when I went to college, I ended up getting a bachelor's in lighting design, Bachelor of Fine Arts. So we really dealt with more of the artistic side and the theatrical side of things. But that basis that I had from high school kind of let me have bigger ideas, I think, sometimes even than the professors at the college. They would kind of get upset that I was maybe pushing them forward a little too fast, or always eager to use new technology when maybe it wasn't available or affordable at the college.
So that first bit that you shared was kind of some of your background from high school. Now we're in college. So where did you go from there, from your career? And then I understand you've got some really cool behind-the-scenes stuff to share, so we'll dive into that as well.
Yeah, so there's kind of been a couple of different forks in the road how I got to where I'm at now. So while I was in college, I also owned a small production company with a couple of friends in high school. We were doing corporate events, charity events, and some community style stuff when I was doing that, but also worked for a touring magician at the time. So on a lot of time on the weekends during college, I would fly out, and meet up with the tour. We do 2 or 3 shows in a weekend. I'd fly back, be in class Monday morning, do the week, and then go ahead and jump and do that all over again. So kind of a lot of different ways that it took me to the current place that I'm at.
And then, let's dive right in. Then you've got some really cool stuff that you've done. Whether I think the first one's in esports, is that right?
Yeah, this is an esports event. I believe it was called Battle of Brotherly Love. Yes, if you guys can see the image. So this was a corporate style event. Actually, one of the last events that we had done before the global pandemic took hold and canceled everything, as we know. But I kind of wanted to use this as the first example of the relevance of college and my theater experience, and then going into the corporate production television world. And this is kind of the perfect transition photo here to show that of how we're taking, all of these new technologies and putting them into these theatrical environments. A couple of cool challenges with this one, actually. In the middle of the load-in on this show, I believe we started at some point at 2:00 in the morning or something on a Friday. And then there happened to be a double booking, and the band Boys to Men was coming into the space right in the middle of our load-in. So we were working all night long up until the point that Boys to Men came in. We had to take all of our equipment and nest it up above the existing curtains and things that were there. So they were able to come in and push their equipment underneath of us, do their entire show, load out, and then we came back again, I think at something like 3:00 in the morning to get ready for an 8 a.m. show. So that was pretty interesting. Yeah.
And outside of just theater, you've also done things in spaces that are more unusual for this group, like probably you think you did some stuff in cruise ships?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we can dive into some cruise ship stuff. So kind of the beginning and the biggest challenge of working with these different cruise ships is the logistics. You're going through all sorts of customs procedures, depending if the ship is leaving dock, if it's staying at dock. Some of these events are dockside. Some of them are actually on the ship. We do a lot of christening, so we're the ones that are lucky enough to get to slam the massive champagne bottles into the side of the ships for good luck, which is some kind of cool stuff. I'll show you this next photo here. This was something really exciting that we got to do. We actually got to board a cargo ship, and we were lighting the ship, the passenger ship, directly in front of it, but we utilized the cargo ship for some lighting positions and some big beam positions to make that look bigger. And pretty funny, the story goes that we had stayed all night long until the sun came up to program this big, beautiful wash on the side of the boat for news shots, all of that kind of stuff. And we came in the next morning and they moved the boat a couple 100 yards away on show day. So there we were after almost no sleep, show back up at noontime, and sure enough, the boat has moved. So we had to really fly by the seat of our pants there and get everything refocused in the daytime. We're strobing lights at different positions on the boats and just trying to get that all dialed in.
And is that the same job where you had to build the streaming studio inside the boat?
That is actually a different project. And this was actually something that kind of took us through the pandemic. And we worked with our wonderful producers over at Viva Creative on this. Kind of I don't want to overspeak, but kind of a sister company to ours. We work hand in hand with them all the time, and they're just completely creative geniuses. So we worked with them on this live streaming project that took place inside of a warehouse in Miami at actually, I believe it's the activation studio for the cruise ship. So it's where they bring in all the new experiences for people to test out. One of the cruise lines has go-karts, so there's little go-kart tracks inside of there that they're doing for all kinds of testing. But yeah, this was kind of a unique project for us. We usually do live shows, but again, during the pandemic, it was time to pivot. So we went into building some of these studios. You can see kind of something here that's cool. I'm not sure if you can see my pointer or not.
Yep, we can see it.
Excellent. So kind of circling there, we had done this, again, going back to our friends at Mainlight that I had known forever. They specialize in something called the Lightscape curtain. And it's a fiber optic curtain that basically creates this star kind of effect behind you, used a lot in theatrics. So we were able to take pieces from that and actually custom build this into another portion of the set here, just to give a whole nother camera shot and location feel. So I thought that was kind of a unique
the last
piece
thing
in there.
that the last thing you had told me about before we hop over to the panel for a little bit, and we might
Sure.
have time to get back to these slides. You had done a show where you had to work with different lighting designers for some big music acts, and I think
Yeah.
you had some stills and video to share there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yes, so starting here. So we were doing a corporate event last June, and it included the performers, both Sting and Katy Perry. So Sting from the Police and Katy Perry. So we had to figure out a way to get these two acts to blend back to back, but allowing them to have their own unique shows. And they both came with their kind of own list of requirements. One of those big requirements was in the lighting world right now, we're kind of in between on one system and the big system, Grand MA, that is a lighting control system. So we're between the version 2 right now and the version 3. And not to bust on Sting, but he's the older gentleman, so they're still running an MA2 system with kind of an older programmer. And the Katy Perry folks are all young. They had a lot of time to work on previs and that kind of stuff. So we had to figure out how to integrate those two systems together. Came out that it's a pretty clunky way, or there's no real great way to do it. Ended up having to do physical wiring swaps actually to get that to work. So I'm going to go through a couple different just images of that show. This is Katie on stage. Now let's see if we can get this to play. So this is Sting, kind of just giving you the idea of the scale and the technologies there.
But you're having to use the same rig for both artists.
That's correct. So it's the same rig for both artists functioning off of two completely different control systems. And then to complicate things a little bit more also in this space, we'll actually complicated times 2. So there's also a house lighting system that we install kind of for party looks when the audience is coming in and just DJs playing, getting them excited. So on top of everything that's happening on the stage, we're also providing additional kind of entertainment value for around those performances.
And then is this the same one where the technology of the wristbands was coming in?
It is. So this is the same show. They utilize something called PixMob, and I'm sure that you've seen this in maybe some concert photos. Taylor Swift utilizes this technology all the time. And it's basically LED wristbands, necklaces, hats, any kind of element that you could think about that you could put onto a human that's battery operated. And it uses an infrared technology. So there's actually a moving light, as you kind of see the lights on stage moving. Similar thing with an infrared head on it. And as that sweeps across the audience, you're able to individually control, or at least in big blocks, control those lights that are on the audience members.
So you're effectively projecting an invisible to our eyes virtual shape onto the audience, and then the
That is
LEDs
correct.
are reacting to it.
Yep,
Wow.
That's correct. Yeah, and as the technology continues to advance even more, like imagine in a moving light, you have a gobo that gives you that breakup pattern. They're able to drop something similar to that inside of the infrared moving light and create those effects over top of utilizing those audience lighting pieces.
So we've talked a little bit about musicians, but you also deal with some pretty high-profile figures in terms of world leaders and politicians, and I think you told me even the Pope. So, I mean, how does working in a corporate event like that? How different is it when you're working on an elevated stage in terms of that these people are pretty powerful individuals?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall we take all of our clients seriously in that, you know, the integrity of the show and that always matters. But I think there's a new set of challenges when you're talking about a president, when you're talking about a pope, somebody with Secret Service protection, somebody that you have to have constant White House communications with. Also, these events, especially the campaign style events like we had here, organized very hastily at the last minute. I think this particular show, we had gotten a call Friday afternoon, and the actual rally was happening on Saturday. So it was get it in the truck, put a bunch of stuff in there, and we'll figure it out when we get there. And that's what we did, actually. I think pretty successfully here at this one. And I just want to highlight something else here. Just kind of as like a part of the process for some of these politicians, it's all really about big looks and making the place look full. Funny story, I actually showed up to this event and I thought the stage was flipped completely 180 degrees of what it actually was, because they wanted the camera platforms to be at a certain spot inside of the venue. But anyway, getting back to the lighting side, so you kind of see those little pops of strobe lights and things happening in the background. That's just to help kind of fill in, make it look like people are taking a lot of photos. It's good for the news shots. and that kind of stuff. So the political events, like I said, big kind of beam looks we're looking at. It's just kind of a different way of presenting.
And then moving away from campaign events, when you're at a large conference like an APAC,
Sure.
and you have leaders from all around the world, are you ever dealing with the different security requirements depending on the individuals that are speaking, or how are you having to adapt?
Yeah, it's interesting because APAC specifically, again, another show we do with our partners at Viva Creative, all sorts of political folks from Israel, from America. So you're dealing with Israeli Secret Service, you're dealing with U.S. Secret Service, each of them bringing, all of their different challenges. I remember at some point we were bringing these massive water ballasts that were a requirement for the president of Israel, just some different things there. So that coordination into translating that into trying to get a crew schedule together and what your day is going to look like, it really is challenging. This specific event, actually, we did in the rounds. This was at the Verizon Center, I believe, in D.C., and we actually had a turntable built into the center of the stage. So as here you see Donald Trump, Joe Biden, all the candidates in 2016 were there, actually spun around the entire venue at a very, very slow pace, which kind of was a unique presentation, I think, for a politician.
It's a good thing nobody got seasick.
Yeah.
So then moving past that. So what are we looking at now?
So now we are looking at the Pope when he came to Philadelphia, and wow, what a challenge that was.
So
you can
now
imagine
you get to say you were a stand-in for the Pope. That's good.
Right. I was a stand-in for the Pope. Better a stand-in there than some of the other places I've been. Yeah, so some really unique challenges here. The entire city of Philadelphia was completely shut down. Traffic completely gone. National Guard on every single corner. So as you can imagine, trying to get equipment in and out of there and the scanning that had to take place and the coordination for all of that was just insane.
Yeah, on an event like that, I mean, how far in advance are you having to get all of your logistical details figured out? Because once that many people are on the street, you're not moving anywhere fast.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it surprisingly, the event was talked about for a long time, but the final plans really didn't come together until probably a week or two beforehand. So it was a very tight schedule getting that stuff figured out. And a lot like, working on the docks and on the cruise ships, it just takes a lot of patience. Sometimes you just have to hurry up and wait. And then once you get your equipment, you just roll with it and you go the best you can.
And then when you're doing big corporate events, usually these are not public events. Sometimes if it's a conference, you'll have a live streaming or a virtual and a hybrid component.
Sure.
But they're the ones who are bringing in some of those crazy big names, like a Katy Perry or a Sting. Do you have any other stories that you can share from those corporate events?
Yeah, there's all sorts of things that we could share. This is kind of just getting away from talking about artists specifically, but this is another corporate event that we did. I believe this was in San Francisco. And from the design side, something that I really like to do, or we really like to do, is use automation. It kind of turns the event into a 4D feeling. And you can see in this video, we have these massive fingers that are coming down and kind of surrounding the stage in the center. And it's be able to lift up to the roof and make all different sorts of kinetic shapes, movements throughout the whole thing. So again, all the challenges for these corporate events, they're all very unique. You're working in different spaces with different crews in different cities. Something specific, kind of just from a tech nerd side here. This is I believe the Chase Center in San Francisco. And this ceiling, a lot of times when you go into these big arenas, there's a scoreboard that hangs in the middle, and there's this huge open space or this huge open void of steel. So it makes it very difficult to be able to rig. At the Chase Center, they were able to do something kind of remarkable and at the first of its kind, where they have a retracting metal grid that is able to slide out. The scoreboard comes down. When they're finished with the scoreboard, it goes back up and the steel comes and slides back across. And there's a huge amount of rigging potential on that steel.
So every venue is its own animal, but I'd imagine every corporation also is its own animal in terms of they've got a creative vision of what they want for an event, but you're trying to balance that with, well, what are the logistics of the space I'm working in, and what can I actually accomplish with what's technically possible? You've kind of have to mitigate those expectations. What's your approach there?
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of show you what I think is a complete two different sides of the spectrum here. Is talking about spaces and rooms. So this was a massive corporate event. They wanted just a big, loud party for their folks. So they brought in the chain smokers. This was that T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Capabilities, you could do pretty much anything inside of that room. I think it's 110-foot ceiling, loading docks access, all that stuff to the floor is very simple. So looking at that from a design perspective compared to going to this, yes, it looks like it just popped up. This was just a corporate ballroom show, and you can see the ceiling here is probably at 18 feet. So you're much more limited to what you have to do. It's likely in this building that we had to travel all the gear in elevators. So just not built out for an event like a space like a T-Mobile Arena or a Chase Center is.
Now, since the pandemic, a lot of events are going hybrid, and it's not that there's just a camera in the back of the room, and hey, if somebody gets on there, it's nice. Most of your audience is online, is virtual, and the people in the room just get the bonus that they get to network and they get to go to dinner and whatnot.
That's right.
But how are you changing the way that you approach design to react to that change in hybrid events becoming the primary audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the big portions of that, and you can go back to this slide, you can see that we're spending a little bit more time lighting the audience and just making the room look full. That way, when they're getting the camera shots, the people on the other end of the video are really feeling like they're a part of that audience. And then also, you're not in control of the angles, though, because everybody has a phone, right? That's correct. Yeah, and that's what kind of... In this ballroom, we got really lucky that we had a lot of different rigging points. In some ballrooms, you're not quite as lucky. But yeah, you try to light that audience consistently all the way around, so that folks with cell phones taking pictures, you want it to look great on social media. So much of that matters now.
We got panel questions starting to come in. Alex, you wanted to chime in a little bit?
I've got a couple questions. Really
Okay.
excited to have you here, Nick.
It's great to meet you, Alex.
You're good to meet you too. So how do you approach previs, like from the walkthrough to getting ready for the show?
Yeah, so we utilize previs on some of our larger events. One of them being we actually just did a show at Temple University for the country of Lithuania. They came over and did one of their largest cultural events in the world, actually, and brought that over to Philadelphia. Dance style event. So luckily that building was local to us. So we were able to go in there, get specific measurements, get some very specific details of the building, and then put that into a previs machine that we can actually have our lighting consoles hooked up, big screen in front of us. And it's like we're sitting in the arena. We're able to cue. We're able to work on cue lights, our key lights, and have everything really dialed in before we get there.
If you want, because I think you had showed me one time, I think something in Vectorworks, but is that the primary place where you're living? And what are the other specific tools that you're using within previs?
Yeah, so our shows, the basis of our shows are the start in Vectorworks normally. And that's just a CAD software similar to AutoCAD, that kind of thing. And then you're able to import that into whatever previs software that you're using. There's a whole bunch of them out there, and it's slipping my head at the moment exactly what they are.
They have really kind of they've kind of cornered the market of, we can take what you're building in Vectorworks and get it into the lighting model, into the lighting software.
That's correct. Yeah, Vectorworks is an everyday tool for me. That's where we do at least the initial renders for a show. Will all come out of there. And actually, I can pop up a slide here. Yeah, just to kind of show you what's capable coming out of Vectorworks and its 3D, capabilities and things like that. And then, this translates into previs software. Hook up your lighting console, and it's like you're sitting right in front of it. And saves a lot of time on site.
What is the previs software that you use for that?
I believe the name of it's actually slipping me. the one that we had used previously for the show.
And are you utilizing any LiDAR? Like, one of the things that I have to load into a lot of shows, and we oftentimes take a little everything from a Faro to a little BLK 360, or we'll send somebody out and just have them scan it so that I don't have to take any measurements. I'm too
That's
lazy
right.
to take the measurements. I'm just like, hey, how about we just have somebody go in there with a scanner and scan the whole thing, and then come back, and then we can measure it, and we build the settings to start with, and then we can kind of move things around.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we utilize that technology all the time. I don't go out and do the scans normally. That comes to us from a producer or somebody in the room sends it over to us. But yeah, I mean, it's an essential piece of planning for the show.
Now, go ahead, Alex.
Go ahead. What are the technologies that you're most excited about right now?
I think going into previs, and actually the name of it just came back to me. It's called Depends. Brand new software that's out there, really allows you to get some of the feel of effects. You can do fireworks in there. You can do all sorts of lasers. And I think just the industry is moving so fast. I think having the previs software to be able to keep up with that is really important to keep it relevant. Yeah,
absolutely. Got to ask you, we do a lot of stuff in the round. What do you think of the round? You talked about that one that had the turntable was going really slow. What do you think of doing stuff in the round?
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as political events, maybe television interviews, that kind of thing, if you're doing, a broadcast interview, I think it's nice to be able to have the audience in the background and show that there's people there and that they're engaged. My preference on a corporate event is I do like the big set. I think it gives you more areas to hide the kind of eye candy toys and lasers and that kind of thing. And it's just a little bit more exciting. Look, a lot of these people come to these conferences and they're sitting there for 3 or 4 days. I don't think they necessarily want to sit there and look across at their colleague. You have to give them something to be excited about.
Can you tell us what the velocity was? The rotation velocity? Do you know?
Of that stage,
really slow.
I don't remember, but it was really, really slow.
But it does. We did it where it would do about a revolution about every 20 minutes.
Yeah, I would say I would bet it would even be almost 30 minutes that it was a 30-minute time slot.
Moving. You feel like it wasn't moving, but it was moving. Like it
very
was just
slowly. Yeah,
that was the. Now, when you look at venues, what are the things that? I guess the question is, what are the things that you cringe about? Like, what are your pet peeves about venues, and what are the things you're excited to see when you look at a venue?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest pet peeves is a lot of times the hotel ballrooms that you're loading into, and you're going from a loading dock, you're going up 10 floors into an elevator, you're cutting across 1,000 feet of carpet to get to the other place, only to be in a room that has a 20-foot ceiling with really ugly carpet.
The carpet is so bad.
It's always the carpet in those ballrooms. But yeah, I mean, that compared to rolling into T-Mobile Arena, where it's literally, or Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, where you can just pull your truck inside. You have all the capabilities in the world. You can pull generators out back if there's not enough power, ceiling heights, all of that kind of stuff. So just two very different design worlds there, as you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
How do you find new crew? It's always like a challenge when you're doing these. Where do you go to find new people, or how do you end up with new people in your crews?
Yeah, so a lot of it is word of mouth. And so we'll have, a set of programmers. They can't make it. They'll recommend somebody else to us. As far as local crewing companies, we have a couple that we work with. We work with Rhino, Stage Spot, Charm City, and then, of course, the local unions as well as we're going around. So we really we travel with kind of a skeleton crew. If folks out there don't know really how this works, and then we get to the site, then that's where we hire local labor to kind of do the heavy lifting and the case pushing, and we're there really to be the brains of the operation.
No, absolutely.
It's kind of amazing. You're in all of these arenas all over the country. You're at all sorts of different events, but the company's an hour north of Philadelphia in a fairly small town. Like how does your company get hired out of everybody? Like, why are they coming to Pottstown? It's crazy to me.
Yeah. And just generally to talk about the area. So we're located in Pottstown, but we're also very close to Lidditz, Pennsylvania, which is the capital of rock and roll production. Huge sound stages there, literally in the middle of a farm field. You'll have people like Paul McCartney walking around the Lancaster grocery store, next to the Amish guy getting some meat. It's pretty interesting. So really our transportation and logistics, I think at this point is expected in this industry. That look, very little of the work we do is actually in Philadelphia. I would say 70% of our work is on the West Coast. And so you do different things to kind of make that a little bit more appetizing to a client, whether, you make those shipping costs go away to get the show, or they just love working with you and you built that relationship and they want you to be there.
Now, one of the things as LEDs have become more popular, one of the challenges as the camera crew is that we deal with moire and we deal with compression, artifacts and so on and so forth. What do you think really, from your perspective, really alleviates some of those challenges with cameras?
Space. Having space between the subject and between the screen is definitely the key there, in my opinion. Also, getting your color temperature right. A lot of times, the LED guys will come in. They'll also have that screen turned up to 100%. If you get that thing dialed back, balance that nicely with the foot candles that you're putting out on the stage, getting the camera angles correct, you can really help alleviate that. But again, the biggest thing, like I said, is space between that person or the object and the screen itself.
What's
is your best friend there
on your screens?
Usually 2.8 on the larger shows. When we get into a little bit tighter rooms, video shoots, that kind of stuff, I believe it goes down to 1.2. I think is some of the highest quality stuff that we've used. That is quite impressive.
Yeah.
Now, when you're when you are transporting all of that gear, I mean, you're doing some. Well, I guess the question really is, how much of what you're doing is rented locally versus how much are you getting a caravan of semis to leave Pottstown to go to Vegas and Miami and wherever else?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the show. So if we talk a little bit about how some of the rock and roll concerts work and that kind of things, they have very specific riders that you have to fulfill. We own a lot of equipment, but the likelihood that we're going to have every single piece of that equipment that's on the rider is not feasible, and it's not feasible for a lot of companies. So in those instances, for instance, we did something for Dave Matthews Band a couple years ago that had some very specific lighting fixtures. We rented most of that locally because we didn't have the equipment. So we just go out to San Francisco. We have relationships with companies out there. We'll pick it up locally. We'll take it to the arena and set it up just like we would our equipment. Other times, some of these big corporate events, we're actually the designers. We get to spec the equipment. So, of course, we spec within our inventory. And that's when we have a caravan of trucks perhaps going to D.C. or all the way across the country.
And then when you're using equipment that you own, how does that impact your ability to translate from your previs work into actual production? Because if you're doing a rental, you don't get to start actually plugging that stuff in until you get there. Is that very different?
Well, no, actually, I mean, you can fixtures that you don't have, in your inventory and things, you can put into previs. When it comes down to previs, the biggest thing you have to pay attention to is when you're actually on site and how you're physically hanging those fixtures. You want to get it as close as you did in the previs machine for all of your work to pallets and things to land where they're supposed to.
Courtney, you had a question?
I was wondering what software you're using to coordinate your lighting control coordinated with LED wall playback to keep everything in sync with, a lot of pre-created effects and graphics in the background.
Yeah, so I actually myself do very little on the video side other than implementing it or designing it into a set. So not sure exactly what that talkback is in between. Obviously, we've had media servers and things hooked up to our consoles that are kicking back to the LED folks, and they take it from there.
And what software do you use to do that?
Control
software.
The control software on our end would just be typically Grand MA equipment.
And then they're going sync to is that to a time code clock or that a click tracker?
So to a media server. So the console drives the media server itself. Media server outputs to Video Village or whatever that is, and they take that content and run.
So we do have some producer questions coming in. We can start to fill those in. Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri writes in, what early control apps would you recommend for people just getting started?
Yeah, there's something great actually for an iPad or an iPhone that's called Luminaire. You buy a little ArtNet box or streaming ACN style box. You can hook that right up to a wireless router, connect it to your phone, and it gives you multiple universes of control. Very easy to understand, very easy to cue. If it's kind of a party style thing, it's the perfect application for that.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana writes in, why should a technical production student learn Vectorworks? What other software would you recommend these students learn?
Yeah, I think definitely getting into the Adobe suite, Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, especially if you're looking to be on the design side. That's something that you'd want to be involved with. Also, another software program that I don't use myself, it's called Lightwrite. It's just a way of organizing your information for load-ins for designers, lines up channel numbers, dimmers, and all sorts of different information, and kind of formats it into a proper schedule.
Because you're having to manage how many control channels per fixture, and how are you going to lay out your universes, and how are you plugging all those together?
That's right. And as the industry moves forward, that's becoming more and more complicated. I mean, we went from fixtures in the early 2000s that maybe were 5-6 control channels a piece to today you have 300 to 350 control parameters per fixture. So it's really
have 512 channels per universe, so you get a light and a half.
That's correct. Yeah. I mean, we've definitely run into that situation. We try to utilize something called streaming ACN or ArtNet when we are using high, a bunch of fixtures at those high channels. It allows it to process differently than DMX itself. So you're able to exceed 512 channels.
How much of that work is done where you're still everything wired together versus is there any wireless solution when you're trying to get into control, and is there reliability, or how new is that technology?
Yeah, so the wireless technology, it's been around for a while, but it's really starting to improve with something called CRMX. And a company called Astera is actually really helping to push that technology, the wireless technology, forward. They have a whole array of all different sorts of lights. I'm actually using something called the hydro panel behind me. Just a little TV studio light, anything up to 3-meter long effect tube that you would use in the background, or maybe even as a soft light for a video production.
Let's get back to producer questions. Jason?
Ben Jordan in Surrey, Great Britain writes in, I'm always interested in the home studio arrangements of our guests, and I must commend you on the exceptional quality of your Zoom video. May I kindly inquire if you would be willing to share a brief overview of your current lighting setup?
Yes, absolutely. So behind me, as I just mentioned, is the Astera Hydra panels. It's an RGB AW. I believe there's a Lime LED in there also. So I'm currently using, I believe, 5 or 6 of those. One of them is a key light on myself, and then also on the backdrop here.
And then
Yep.
we put a ZV-E10, I think, in for your camera as well. If you're curious on the
CJ was kind enough to come get me set up.
Were you going to say something else? Sorry, I cut you off.
Just that they're completely battery operated fixtures, these specific Hydra panels, and are able to be controlled by your phone. Something that is really cool about Astera is there's actually an app that connects via Bluetooth, and similar to Luminaire, like I was talking about on the iPad, for Astera products specifically, it's a really nice control surface.
Next question.
Ian Montagna in Madison, Wisconsin writes, who or what are your design influences? For example, painters, sculpture, architecture, other theater or graphic designers?
Yeah, I think most of, something that's really cool about this industry is when you're working with other designers, other lighting designers, scenic designers, they might have a really cool idea, but it's so collaborative that then you're taking their inspiration and you're maybe taking that to the next level. So say the designer before me, kind of the image that I was showing of the moving piece, maybe they had it that it was just, straight fingers. We came in and then we made it that it's able to be automated, and so on and so on. So I really think that my inspiration is kind of going to shows, seeing what others are doing, taking some of those ideas, making them my own, and improving on them.
I know you're a concert guy. Are there any lighting designers that are working in rock and roll concerts or pop concerts that are particularly inspirational to you?
Yeah, well, I think Steve Cohen would definitely be one of them. Longtime lighting designer for Billy Joel. Started watching his stuff when I was probably still in diapers, and it's kind of stayed with me, and I love to watch his work.
And then because I'm also a fan of Billy Joel. The trivia, though, what's the console that they're using?
I believe that is a Martin Maxi that they've been using for years, kind of an old piece of technology that I think Steve had just gotten so used to running live that he's stuck with it.
Compared to your modern consoles, if you were to compare that to a modern car, are you like going back 30 years, 40 years?
I would say maybe 20 years. I don't want to be that dramatic. But yeah, probably going back 20 years. And I'm not even sure how they deal with some of that back end stuff with that console, because it is a very large lighting rig that they have.
Remember the artist, right? The artist, that's the tool that the artist knows how to use.
That's right. Exactly. And Steve, the way that he does design and the way that he does operate the show is he's very much a member of the bands. You could feel in his lighting that it's really going with, he'll pick out the drummer and it's hitting every beat with the drummer, or maybe a certain thing with the keyboards, and he's really able to emulate that through the lighting.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana writes in, have you had any mentors as you've advanced in your career? What is best learned this way? And are you mentoring anyone now?
Yeah. So I'm super lucky. So when I joined VTG in 2013, I had done a year of freelancing prior to that, but my current boss is definitely the biggest mentor that I had. He kind of took me from, the base level guy in the back of the shop wrapping cables to where I'm at now, getting to design and implement these really ridiculously cool shows. Also another guy, Rudy Rodriguez. He's a production rigger now for some really big stadium acts. Mentor to me. Look, and the thing is, when you're looking for a mentor, you just have to be willing to work. People will always take you under their arm if you're willing to work and you're willing to learn. And I think that's so important to show people, especially in this industry.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes in, how can the event production industry reach out to the neurodivergent community? CBS Sports has had success with them in media asset management roles, but could you see them succeeding in other roles despite the need for strong communication skills?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much back end work. If you're an independent worker, I think things like designing in Vectorworks, maybe managing the spreadsheets that come out of Lightworks and all that different kind of stuff. There's plenty of different avenues for people to work on.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana writes in, on shipping logistics, have you ever had a truck not make it or be late? How do you deal with it, and how do you avoid any shipping issues? Yeah, that happens sometimes more frequently than we care to admit. One of the shows that I believe I showed some pictures of earlier, and I'll bring it up here again. So we had all these kind of really hard to find lights coming in from Orlando, Florida. We were working in Las Vegas. We had plenty of lead time to get these things here, but sure enough, the truck broke down in Dallas, and the driver just walked away from the truck. No communication, no nothing, and our equipment was in the middle of nowhere. So, in that specific instance, we were able to send what they call a rescue truck. We called up some of our resources. They made it to Dallas, drove it. I think it was probably at least 16 hours from Dallas over to Vegas. But yeah, it does happen, and you have to be ready to adapt. And again, in this industry, every single thing is relationships. If you really get into a pinch, you need to know the person in California, in Chicago, in Dallas that's going to be able to be there and help bail you out.
Now, how much redundancy are you building in terms of spare fixtures and backups in case something doesn't make it, or are you having to change your show and change your cues once the stuff didn't show up?
Yeah, I mean, so spare-wise, I would say we usually carry about 20% spares, especially on the lighting fixture side. Any kind of consoles, networking equipment, processing, we always have double. There's always complete redundant backups. But yeah, if you have to get something locally, I mean, it is a change of plans for sure. And you might have to rework your DMX, universes and patches and all that kind of stuff to be able to integrate a different fixture.
So having somebody who has the experience and knows how to do that quickly and fail over without there being because you're running a whole redundant console. So if you have the show running on one, the show's running on a different console that's not plugged into anything, just waiting for something to go wrong over here. Because
that's right.
Wow. Sorry. Next question.
John Preto writes in, do you have or see an IP-based approach for lighting via RJ45s on fixtures using IP tools for lighting control?
Yeah, so I think perhaps they're talking about something like streaming ACN or ArtNet. All of those, we've gone from using our 5-pin cables of DMX and ones and zeros to be able to go over to Ethernet and smart processing with streaming ACN. Something really cool that's also came out of that is that you can actually have light talkback now. So these things are like mini robots by the hundreds hanging up in the ceiling, different places. they might be overheating, they might have jammed gobos, they might have bad lamps, they might just be simply falling apart because it's an older fixture. And with that technology, it's actually able to kick back. It's called RDM, kick back fixture information to you. So every single time that something goes wrong, you don't necessarily have to get in the lift, climb the truss. You might be able to diagnose some of those problems just simply from the grounds.
Courtney, you had something on this one?
Yeah, I was wondering concerning controlling the lights. Do you still use, follow spot operators, or do you have a way of tracking a performer that, goes all over the stage in real time? And is there AI that's used for tracking that automatically, or do you have an operator that's just following them and controlling them from a console?
Yeah, so I haven't seen anything with AI yet, but that's a pretty interesting concept. There's kind of three different things. So like you talked about, you have your standard spotlight operator, the guy up there either in the truss or in the balcony shining the light on the stage. And then there's something that's kind of came around in the last, I'd say 5 to 8 years, and it's called a Roby follow spot. And there's a couple different versions of it. Roby's one that makes it, but you practically hang a moving light up into your grid with an adjoined camera. That goes back to a pedestal that looks very similar to how a spotlight would actually look in person. It's a digital piece, and you're able to move that light around and track that person around on the screen using a target and a moving light. So really in the rock and roll kind of things, when there was real safety issues of people having to go up in truss, it's really helped to alleviate that and make it a little bit more practical, like for backlights that you might want tracking people. You don't have to necessarily have an operator behind them. You can track that all from a space. We set them up a lot of times just right underneath the stage, and the operators sit under there and watch their screens. And then there's also a third technology that is like a follow me. So you put on a sensor of sorts, and there's a sense black tracks, and there's a very, very difficult to set up. I don't recommend it ever for one-off events. If you're doing an install, fine, keep it out of the one-time events.
Yeah,
but it is very nifty. It's very nifty technology. It's been around for a long time. They've made some real improvements to it, but it is can be very difficult to use if it's not a daily item for you.
Next question.
Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois writes in, is lighting for TV production different from concert production?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some pretty big differences. Obviously, if you're at a concert, the idea of having those big impact moments that match the music. Whereas on the television side, I think you're a little bit more honed into color temperature, CRI of your fixtures, and just really honing that in and making it look correct for the camera. And still matters on the rock and roll side, the color temperatures and things like that, because people are up on massive IMAX screens, sometimes in stadiums. So it does matter there, but you're really, really trying to dial that in on the interview style events.
Next question.
Our own Alex Lindsay in Novato, California writes in, how important do you think your early days of grinding through the show after show was to your career?
Yeah, I mean, the more hands-on experience you can get doing something, the better. And I personally really, really grinded at the beginning, starting, like as we talked about at the beginning of this, in high school. Kind of did double duty in college with the touring musician, and yeah, the more time, it's a hands-on industry. The more time you can get on the equipment, the more time. And I haven't talked a whole lot about this today, but I also design a lot of scenic stuff. So being able to be back in the shop and watching those guys how they're building things just makes you simply a better designer.
I think you're probably being a little modest. If we go back to some of those first slides that you had showed us of some of the stuff that you were doing as a teenager, can you take us through some of those, like what you were doing literally, before you could even drive?
Yeah. So if you could bring up this slide here, so kind of a mix of different things here. A lot of working with the theater companies and things in high school, but we also had the opportunity to kind of put on some basic concerts, as you can see here with the park cans behind, but then also get into the corporate style events. So I really had a very different broad spectrum, I think, in high school compared to some other people.
Yeah, and it's a little tricky to see as part of the collage, but in that upper left, you literally have a half-ton motor suspending a whole truss structure over a gymnasium.
That's right.
The fact that you're doing that at such a young age is
scary.
It is scary. Yeah, that is scary. But
yeah, sometimes
also,
you look back on it, it's like, wow, we really did those things. We had no qualifications to do that.
But then it sets you up to be in leadership positions at a much younger age than a lot of the people that you're probably managing. How do you think your kind of career trajectory and getting to where you are at such a relatively young age is impacted? Like, what challenges are you facing there?
Yeah, I mean, the first couple of years of being a leader at VTG, it created and took some thick skin to be able to deal with some of these older guys that are some really industry, as we call them, road dogs, right? Kind of the hardened guys that have been doing this forever. So, yeah, I mean, I have a strong personality. I think I'm able to convey my ideas in a strong way, and so people have always generally respected me back. But it is difficult. It was difficult being the youngest guy on the crew.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana writes in, are there instruments that still work better as tungsten, or are LEDs replacing all lamps?
Yeah, so as far as the industry revolution is happening, yes, LED is starting to replace everything. Now, there is certainly still a need and an aesthetic to tungsten. I'd actually like to bring this slide up. This is something that we do that's broadcasted every Thanksgiving Day. It's the National Dog Show, designed by Chris Rossi, who's somebody with our company in collaboration with NBC. So as we're looking at this, the aesthetic of this show, as you're looking up in the truss grid, is the star filters, is the par cans. So I think there's not a whole lot of evolution happening in the tungsten world, but I still think that it warrants itself in certain designs and kind of can be a staple look. A matter of fact, in talking about that being a staple look, I'm going to flip over to this. This is from a South Park episode where they actually ripped off our truss grid and the camera shots there to put on their own what they called the gun show.
Hey, that's my look. Wait a minute.
That's right. So we thought that was pretty funny.
That's a nice homage.
Yeah.
Next question.
Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois writes in, Nathan, you mentioned alternative control protocols other than DMX. Will you speak more about that? How do they integrate with DMX fixtures?
Yeah, so streaming ACN has become really a golden standard in the way that information communicates from the console to perhaps a node that goes to spit out DMX from that node. So you're able to kind of branch out a whole topography of Ethernet running to a position. Maybe you'll have 16 DMX ports, at one dimmer pit, maybe 24 at another dimmer pit, depending how your looms and things are running up on the truss. But yeah, streaming ACN can also be and is starting to be utilized just connecting directly to lighting fixtures themselves. It's not something that I've executed on a whole lot. I still prefer to use that copper wire. Maybe that's a little old school of me. But really, there's something to the safety net of a DMX cable and the way that the integrity that it's built. I've seen some situations where people have been using streaming ACN things on fixtures. They're using the $2 Radio Shack cables, which is very scary to keep those connected together. Again, call me old school, but I like the true copper connection that's been proven forever.
And
there are possibilities.
Is ACN the technology that works with like a Stardust?
Yeah, that's correct. So something like a Stardust wireless box. Again, we've implemented that in some massive wireless installations, at a couple of technology companies out west. But that Stardust box is able to take in that streaming ACN information being spit out from the console, process it, and then push it out wirelessly to, I believe the capabilities of their best unit is 8 separate universes out of 4 antennas. It's pretty impressive stuff. And then it also gives you the ability, which is really cool, if you're managing it in a thinking of an example that was probably at least 2 or 3 square miles big that we did this wireless install. You can go back to one central location, like you're dialing into a computer, dial into your wireless node. If you want to go in there and you want to take certain frequencies out, all of that stuff can all just be done completely remotely without actually having to walk to the location.
So if you're somebody that's you 15 years ago or 20 years ago today, and you want to get into this space and you want to learn about it, and this really is what switches you on and gets you excited, What are the steps what do you recommend somebody that just wants to get started, that wants to learn more? Where do they go? What do they learn?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the earliest age possible, like we did, CJ, in high school, getting involved in those programs, getting yourself interested, just understanding what the capabilities are. I never discourage college for people going into this industry. I think it lent a hand to my ability to collaborate and communicate like a designer or like a technician. But it's really getting out there and meeting people. Look, shops like ours are looking to hire the bottom of the barrel cable wrapper. And I'm kind of that success story where I started as that cable wrapper and now I made it to here. So you have to go out there and you have to work hard. And you have to show that you're willing to learn.
How much weight do you have when you see someone new? Do you pay attention to their cable wrapping skills? That's what I want to know.
Luckily, I'm not running out as much cable as I used to. But yeah, I mean, it matters. It matters how the cables are wrapped. It could add hours to your load in. That's for sure.
What do you think is in the future? What does the future hold for this, for the live events industry, as things are going to hybrid? There's so many, where it's such what seems like an inflection point in your space. Where do you see the future?
Nothing replaces live, in my opinion. Nothing replaces the live experience, and I think people are always going to be hungry for that. I think corporations are always going to be willing to pay for that. I think the hybrid situation has expanded the audiences, but it hasn't taken the audiences away from wanting to be live. You can't replace the live experience.
And arguably, if you're competing with people who have an 85-inch or 100-inch TV in their home and have a really good sound system and have, they might even have lights that they feel like they're controlling with their home app. And obviously, that's not on the scale that you're doing.
Yeah.
But you're having to really dramatically change and make bigger your shows because your competition is not what it was.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it has been an evolution moving over to the streaming side for sure. And I think just generally look at the way we'll design a set, right? Like we might design the set a whole lot tighter if there's going to be 20 people in the audience and a hybrid audience compared to a show that we used to do at the Dallas Convention Center that was just a 300-foot wide stage. It was all about the live experience. So there's a lot that's different there.
Yeah, arguably you have to make the event, even if it is 20 people or it's not the audience that it was, that's not what you're showing. You want to show that it's crowded and it's somewhere that you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the human interaction. It's the human interaction. It's the instant feedback from the person sitting next to you, the person getting excited in front of you, and just being in that environment that is irreplaceable.
How much of your world has changed since COVID?
A lot of what we did changed during COVID. Obviously, as we talked about, pivoting over, the live environment was just completely dead. For us, business slowed down a little bit. It's rebuilding. One of the big things that changes, I think, is schedules in general. It was a great opportunity for large corporations and event planners to kind of maybe go after the dream dates for their event or their room rental that they always had. And the scheduling was really a big change. But the industry has come back, and it's come back strong.
So where can people find you if they want to learn more, they want to reach out? Where are you hanging out, and where can they get in touch?
Well, I'm hanging out all over the country, but you can always get me, Nate at vtg.show. That's a great contact email. I work for a company called Vision Technical Group. If you Google my name, Nate Schlegel, I'll come right up, I'm sure, on LinkedIn also.
And don't be a stranger. You're our kind of people.
Yeah, I'd love to hang out with you guys again. This was fun. I hope I didn't ramble too much.
Fantastic. Really fantastic.
Couple thank yous for everybody. Actually, one quick reminder. We do have the new panelist meeting is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. If you're interested in being on the panel and getting in the conversations, getting your questions or getting your wisdom shared with the group and talking to really great guests like Nate. Also, thank you to all the panelists. Without you, we couldn't do this show. We wouldn't have the conversation. We wouldn't have the questions. Thank you to our producers for asking such great questions, not only in the first hour, but also helping us learn more about the world of live production with Nate. And thank you to the crew on the back end who get up, a small village gets up every day, 7 days a week to make this show possible, helping make us look and sound good, cutting the show, and delivering a great product to you. We owe them the world. Philolic Traversal today, we went 50,000 miles. That's 81,000 kilometers, which is 397 million bananas for scale. All right, we'll see you in after hours. Thanks, everyone.
That was great.
We did it.
We did it.
Well done, Nate. That was great.
Hey, thank
really
you guys.
I love that the Simpsons gun show is sponsored by Purina.
Yeah. slip that right in
really
there.
conducive with dogs.
It's
Not
funny, if you
many
go back and
people-
look at the YouTube clip, you compare it, the camera shots of the YouTube clip of the South Park to the actual show. It's quite
Yeah, they
quite
still
funny.
framed it. That was like
They
perfect.
copied it,
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you guys. I'll figure out my audio routing stuff. Sorry about that.
All good.
But excellent.
right.
We'll see you guys in a little bit. Nate,
All right,
thank
see
you.
later.
Yes, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye.